The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a classic film that needs no long-winded introductions. It is a riveting story about three gunslingers competing to find fortune in the midst of the chaos that is the great American Civil War. The film is certainly one of the most memorable of all time, and aside from its story, the making of the film is also one that keeps people hooked. There are so many weird facts you probably didn't know about it, from tensions between cast and crew, to nearly fatal experiences for some of the film's stars. It was a wild ride in making The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, so buckle up because you're in for a rocky ride. Eli Wallach almost lost his life because of a horse. The brilliance of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly's opening scenes was almost the tragic end for Eli Wallach. In the popular first scene where Blondie shoots Tuco down from his noose, a simple gunshot sound effect triggers quite a scary accident. The horse Wallach was riding got startled by the noise and then bolted and went into a full-speed stampede. The situation was completely uncontrollable, and with his hands tied behind his back for that scene, Wallach was left defenseless. The one thing he could do was to cling on with his knees, and he desperately did his best to stay in the saddle as the horse galloped out of control. The whole crew was left horrified at the incident, and they watched as the horse disappeared into the distance with their star actor clinging onto it for dear life. The horse ran so fast and for nearly a mile before the crew managed to catch up to it and then bring the whole thing to an end. Wallach was undoubtedly scarred and shaken, but fortunately he was unharmed and finally taken off the horse. This was a close call and one of the several near-fatal incidents for the actor on set. It is weird to look back on it now and think about how the off-screen moment adds a new layer to the on-screen moment viewers witnessed in the film. Eli Wallach almost lost his life because of an oncoming train. Speaking of nearly fatal accidents that Eli Wallach went through, here's another crazy one for you. A little bit later in the film, when escaping Union Army captors, Tuco makes use of the wheels of an upcoming train to break his handcuffs and escape to freedom. The director, Sergio Leone, insisted that Eli Wallach himself perform the stunt because he wanted Tuco's face to be visible. Leone was very good at assuring Wallach that while the train would be loud and scary, it most certainly would be safe. However, Leone also failed to mention the low-hanging step rails that protruded from the carriages. These were just inches above Wallach's head and would have caused severe injuries if he had raised them at all. The weird part of it all is that shooting The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was just as dangerously real for Wallach as it was for his character Tuco. It was clearly one dangerous scene after another, and luckily for him, he was unharmed by the end of it all. The weirdest part is that the rails in that particular scene can even be seen in the wide shot, if you look closely, and it shows how unpleasantly close they were. Eli Wallach almost lost his life when he accidentally drank acid. Fortunately for Eli Wallach and the viewers of the film, the third time wasn't the charm. This was another weird accident involving Eli Wallach and his several accidents on set. This time around, while they were filming the film's climactic Sad Hill Cemetery scene, the crew used acid to weaken one of the bags of gold so that it would split immediately when Tuco hit it with his shovel. However, what they failed to mention to anyone was that they were keeping the acid in an old lemon soda bottle. The weirdest part of it all is that it was a brand that Wallach really liked and had been drinking on set. So imagine his surprise after he picked up the innocent-looking bottle, only to have a taste of some highly corrosive liquid. Luckily for him, his instincts kicked in immediately, and then he spat out the acid before swallowing it. Fortunately for him, he kept his life intact again this time. However, he was left performing the scene with a mouth full of painful sores. This lineup of crazy and nearly fatal accidents turned out to be in line with all of Eastwood's warnings about Italian film crews and their lack of safety awareness. The film is a prequel to two of Leone's previous films that starred Eastwood. While The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was the final film released in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, its timeline is a point of fascinating debate among fans. Many fans argue that the films are best watched in reverse chronological order of their release. The most compelling evidence for this is that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is explicitly set during the American Civil War of the 1860s, which is a decade before the events of the first two films, which have newspaper and gravestone dates pointing to the 1870s. Away from the historical setting, there's a compelling character-based argument for this viewing order. In The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Clint Eastwood's character Blondie is at his most ruthless and is purely driven by his opportunist nature and money. The film also acts as a sort of origin story for his iconic look, as he is seen acquiring his signature poncho and hat. Then, if you proceed to watch A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, you can see how the character gradually progresses. Chronologically, in the second and first films of the trilogy, Blondie shows a growing sense of compassion and code of ethics. In A Fistful of Dollars, he protects his family, and then in For a Few Dollars More, he teams up with Lee Van Cleef's character for a more complex moral mission. The films were never actually meant to be a trilogy. Speaking of which, the order to watch all three films, one weird fact about it all is that while the Dollars trilogy is now popular and known all over the world, Leone never had the intention to make it a trilogy or even have any sort of continuity. He simply wanted to make three spaghetti westerns starring Clint Eastwood as three very similar characters, even with three different names, which include Joe, Monco, and Blondie, respectively, as opposed to none. The Whole Man with No Name concept was invented by United Artists, the film's American distributor. They believed that presenting the film as a trilogy would be an effective way to market the whole thing, and it actually worked out for the film. It also took Clint Eastwood's character development into account. To sum it all up, the film didn't turn out exactly the way Leone had imagined it would. On the plus side, Leone's emphasis on Blondie acquiring the iconic sheepskin vest and brown poncho probably didn't help in making the film separate entities. At the end of the day, it all worked out exactly the way it was supposed to, and today, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a classic. The Good is actually the most violent out of all three. The title of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is known to be quite ironic, and it is quite apparent in the on-screen body count. Despite being labeled as the good, Clint Eastwood's character, Blondie, actually is the deadliest one of the trio and has a higher kill count than both of his counterparts combined. The character Tuco, also known as the Ugly, is quite volatile and known to be a bandit. He actually takes the lives of 6 people in the film, and then Blondie has the number of 11 people, while Angel Eyes, or the Bad, is the least lethal of all, with only 3 on-screen bodies to his name. The difference isn't even about the screen time each character gets. Blondie and Tuco are on screen for almost the same amount of time, making Blondie's higher kill count a more deliberate choice by the filmmakers. The real difference that justifies their labels isn't the number of people they assassinate, but who they assassinate. Blondie and Tuco operate with a set of rules to guide them, and they kill rival bounty hunters, fellow bandits, and corrupt soldiers. All of these people are part of the violent and lawless world in which they live. Angel Eyes, on the other hand, has no code or rules. He gets rid of people in a manner that is quite evil, and his method drives terror as he tries to achieve his goals, no matter the cost. He ruthlessly takes the life of a former soldier, his young son, and a defenseless, bedridden invalid. All these differences just go to show that good isn't about being virtuous, it is about being less monstrous than the bad. The film caused a fall between Eastwood and Leone. After the whole production and the release of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly were done, Clint Eastwood was not pleased with the result. He felt that the film was quite bloated instead of being expansive, and he also felt that Tuco was the only character that had been adequately explored and fleshed out. This wasn't a great sign of the relationship between the star actor and the director. In fact, before the film was ever in production, Eastwood had already had a strained relationship with Sergio Leone. The actor was tired of the director's exhausting and frequently unnecessary need to be perfect, and also his bad temper on set. So it will come as no surprise that after everything had wrapped up, Eastwood was more than happy to be free of it, and he never worked with Leone again. It's not every day that you see the director and actor of a successful film at crossroads with one another. Eastwood even declined the role of harmonica in the early draft of Once Upon a Time in the West. and this was Leone's next Western epic. As a result of that, Leone was finally able to work with Charles Bronson after 2 initial rejections. The film's story was improvised in a meeting. In the late 1965, A Fistful of Dollars and its sequel, For a Few Dollars More, were not yet available in the United States. Still, their success in Europe had American film executives eager, hoping to capitalize on the buzz and secure a lucrative American distribution deal. The director, Sergio Leone, and the writer, Luciano Vincenzoni, brought 2 United Artists executives, Arthur Krim and Arnold Picker, to Rome, where they were treated to a screening of the second film at a major cinema where For a Few Dollars More was playing to a crowd. The American executives were very interested and agreed to pay $900,000 for the American rights. This was a big amount at that time, especially since Eastwood wasn't even a massive star yet. However, when it came time to sign the deal, Picker asked if Leone, Vincenzoni, and producer Alberto Grimaldi had thought about what they would be doing next because he was hoping for another Western to package with the first 2 films. The 3 men hadn't even considered or thought of the idea yet, but Vincenzoni quickly thought of the idea and then improvised. He recalled that he didn't know why, but the poster came to mind. It was Il Buono, Il Brutto, Il Cattivo, meaning the good, the bad, and the ugly. He stated right there and then, it's the story of 3 bums that go around through the Civil War looking for money. Clint Eastwood's salary demands delayed filming. Eastwood had initially agreed to return for a 3rd film. Still, he was disappointed when he read the script and found out he would have to share the screen with 2 other major actors, Eli Wallach and Lee Van Cleef, both of whom had already starred with Eastwood in For a Few Dollars More. Eastwood felt as though this particular group would make his presence in the movie less of a focus. He didn't want the role, and negotiations for the 3rd film fell apart, but his agents and publicist worked pretty hard to get him back to the production. The weirdest part of this whole thing was that, because the film still had not come out in America, Eastwood wasn't even a major star yet. Still, his agents were able to get him a $250,000 salary, which was more than the whole budget of A Fistful of Dollars, plus 10% of the profits when the film was finally released in America. He was also promised a new Ferrari, and in the end, he finally accepted the job. Eli Wallach said yes after seeing minutes of the previous film. When Sergio Leone was on a hunt for the perfect actor to play the chaotic Tuco, also known as the Ugly, he had his sights set on an Italian actor known as Gian Maria Volonté, who ultimately turned down the role. This sent Leone in a new direction, and then he found an American actor named Eli Wallach, who was already a well-known stage performer and also known in the world of movies for his roles in films like The Magnificent Seven. At first, Wallach wasn't sure about joining an Italian-made Western, so to convince him, Leone's team arranged a special screening of one of his earlier films, A Fistful of Dollars or For a Few Dollars More. The moment Wallach sat down to watch, his doubts were immediately taken away. After only a few minutes, Leone's bold style so struck him, the dramatic close-ups and the visual power of the whole film, that he stopped the film. He knew he had seen enough, and while the conventional American Western was a known entity, he saw that Leone's films were something new and exciting to get into. Wallach immediately realized that this was a chance to create a truly unforgettable character within a mind-blowing new genre. So he accepted the job on the spot, and that quick decision led to his place in film history. His iconic and wildly charismatic performance as Tuco would ultimately become the heart and soul of the film, and this just goes to show the power of listening to one's instincts the way Wallach did. Orson Welles tried to discourage Sergio Leone from making the film. In the pre-production stages of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, things didn't go smoothly, and according to plan for director Sergio Leone. In fact, he faced several challenges, including one from a place he least expected it. Turns out, legendary filmmaker Orson Welles was strongly critical of Leone pursuing the production of this film. He warned Leone about how American Civil War films were practically considered box office poison. You might be thinking this was just a random piece of advice, but it wasn't. The caution from Welles had stemmed from his decades of experience in the industry. Ever since the commercial failure of So the Red Rose in 1935, almost all films set during the Civil War had struggled to find an audience. The only film that had defeated the odds was Gone with the Wind, so at the time it was understandable to be skeptical. However, Leone was still determined to move forward with his film, even with the warning from Welles. He wanted to create something different and something more authentic than the usual romanticized versions of Hollywood westerns from the past. To ensure he did the film justice, he immersed himself in the work of Matthew Brady, a renowned 19th-century photographer whose documentation of the Civil War is considered the most comprehensive of its kind. Leone was able to use Brady's haunting and realistic images to achieve a great film, and at the end of the day he proved Welles's warnings wrong and created a masterpiece. Charles Bronson turned down the role of Angel Eyes. While Lee Van Cleef performed for a lifetime for the villainous role of Angel Eyes in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, he wasn't actually the first choice for the role. Surprisingly, Sergio Leone had someone else in mind, and he was pretty hesitant to cast Van Cleef as the antagonist. He was afraid that the audience would not accept him as a villain, especially after his previous role as the heroic Colonel Douglas Mortimer in For a Few Dollars More. Leone's first choice for the role of the menacing bounty hunter, Charles Bronson declined the offer because of a scheduling conflict, as he was already committed to filming the classic war film The Dirty Dozen. While this probably wasn't the best news at first, it turned out to be a great turn of events for Van Cleef, who was then cast in the part. This situation was also quite a coincidence, because it wasn't the first time that Charles Bronson had turned down a role that eventually went to Van Cleef. Turns out, before Van Cleef got his role in For a Few Dollars More, he had actually been brought in to replace Bronson. This surprising series of events placed Van Cleef in a great position in all of cinematic history, and with his haunting portrayal of Angel Eyes, he became one of the most iconic villains of all time. Clint Eastwood initially declined the role of Blondie. Even with big stars like Clint Eastwood, it's weird that he also had his doubts about the film. Turns out, when Sergio approached him for what would become The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, their relationship was already in a bad place because of their two previous collaborations. At that time, Clint Eastwood was already used to being the star of the show, so he wasn't sure about a new project. He was also worried that his character Blondie would be overshadowed by the energetic character of Tuco, who hadn't even been cast yet. Eastwood's doubt was clear, and it was because of the ever-evolving nature of films. He once stated, "In the first movie, I was just about alone. In the second, there were two of us, and now three. If it goes on like this, I'm going to end up with a whole cavalry." His comment was clear proof that he wanted to maintain the focused, lone wolf persona that had defined his character. Leone, on the other hand, was beyond determined to get Eastwood. He knew that the success of the film rested heavily on their on-screen chemistry, even though it was born out of real-life tension. The final deal was clearly because of Eastwood's great star power, and because Leone desperately wanted him. So at the end, Eastwood was offered a huge sum of $250,000 so that Leone could secure him in the film. A Town in a Scene is straight out of an earlier Western. As it turns out, Hollywood isn't the only one that reuses film sets. The Italian film industry, known for its creativity and resourcefulness, also does, and they took it to a whole other level with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. For one of the film's early scenes, director Sergio Leone needed a grim, run-down town where Clint Eastwood's Blondie could take Eli Wallach's Tuco for his first hanging. So instead of building a new set, they simply decided to use one that was already there. In the end, the town was the very same set from Sergio Corbucci's classic and influential spaghetti western Django, which had been filmed just a few months earlier. What makes this fact even more interesting is that the production crew of the film didn't change a single thing about the set. Not a single building was repainted, and the streets weren't even cleaned. While you might see this as a lack of effort on their part, it was actually a good move. The whole thing worked in their favor because it gave the town a certain authenticity with its worn-down, muddy look. The town felt like it was lived in and dirty, and it fit in perfectly with the gritty feel Leone wanted to achieve with the film. The set also contributed to the film's sense of historical realism, amplifying its visual elements. Sergio Leone and Eli Wallach actually communicated in French for the most part. One of the weirdest bits about the film is that while the director was famous for making some of the most famous westerns of all time, he could barely speak a word of English at the time The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was being made. For his earlier films with Clint Eastwood, Sergio had relied on interpreters, but this time with Eli Wallach they switched things up with a different workaround. Interestingly enough, both Leone and Wallach were pretty fluent in French, so they used the language as a common denominator. Given that Wallach spoke no Italian whatsoever and Leone's English was limited, they both turned to the French language to communicate. This created a surreal environment on set, one that you just had to be there to witness. Picture an American actor and an Italian director speaking in French to bring an epic American Civil War story to life. It was the perfect solution to the language barrier, and it then became a melting pot of languages, which perfectly reflected the international nature of production itself, blending American and European to create something new. Leone had quite a high level of vision and passion, which, along with Wallach's earth-shattering performance as Tuco, really ties it all together perfectly. Not even a language barrier could stop the magic they were about to create, and this only goes to show that cinema is a universal language all on its own. Only 5 actors delivered their lines in English. One of the most obvious and sometimes criticized aspects of spaghetti westerns is its post-production dubbing, and while The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a great film, it was certainly no exception. The dubbing wasn't even an artistic choice, it was a matter of pure necessity at the time. This is because Italian film studios often lacked the proper soundproofing needed, thereby making it practically impossible to record clean dialogue on set. The solution was then easy. Actors would perform their scenes speaking in their native language, and then all audio would be added in post-production. For a film with an international cast, this created a unique yet challenging dynamic on set, while all 3 lead actors, Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach, were English speakers. The majority of the supporting cast was Italian. This meant that the film's 3 stars were constantly acting opposite actors, speaking a language they did not understand. The picture was pretty clear. Imagine trying to deliver a powerful line when the person across from you is responding in a completely different language. Then, aside from the 3 star actors on set, there was an additional set of 2 actors who spoke English, and they were Al Mulock, who played the one-armed bounty hunter, and John Bartha, who played a small role as a sheriff. This meant that out of all the many actors on set, only 5 were using the language that would become the film's iconic voice. Sad Hill Cemetery was renovated. The breathtaking showdown of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly took place in the bewildering circles of Sad Hill Cemetery, and the set was so iconic that it felt like a whole character on its own. What many people don't know about this graveyard is that it was constructed in 1966 by the Spanish Army, who dug over 5,000 graves to create the perfect setting. However, once filming wrapped, the set was left as it was, and over the decades it became overgrown and was almost entirely hidden. In 2015, a group of dedicated film fans who called themselves the Cultural Association of Sad Hill decided to undertake quite a mission. They wanted to find the location and then restore the legendary location. They launched a crowdfunding campaign and recruited numerous volunteers who traveled to the remote area in Burgos, Spain. What they all had in common was their love for cinema and the shovels they came around with. The entire renovation was documented in the critically acclaimed film Sad Hill Unearthed, and it was proof of how far fans could go to show their dedication. Today, Sad Hill Cemetery is a popular attraction for film fans, with graves bearing names of departed figures such as Sergio Leone and Eli Wallach. Composer Ennio Morricone also had his name inscribed on the stone. This ensures that all those who played a significant role in the film are never forgotten, and that the cinematic masterpiece lives on for generations to come. The skeleton was real. In the cinematic finale of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, when Blondie kicks off the lid of Arch Stanton's coffin for a grand reveal, the skeleton you see there isn't a prop or a special effect, it is actually real. When Blondie kicks the lid of the coffin, there is a skeleton, and that was a very real set of human remains. This is one weird and shocking detail about the film. And it wasn't just random. It was a true addition to a surprisingly touching and unusual story. Instead of renting a plastic skeleton, set designer Carlo Leva learned of a woman in Madrid who had a very unique item for hire. It was the skeleton of her late mother, an actress who, in her will, expressed her wish to continue acting even after her death. The filmmakers realized that it was a respectful way to honor her final wish, so they decided to use the skeleton in the film. This is one weird and fascinating detail about the film that adds an extra layer of morbid authenticity to the whole scene. They chose to use an actual skeleton with a genuine history as opposed to a plastic one. This was the final performance from a woman who wanted her legacy to live on through her art, and so it did. While this decision stemmed from an unusual request, it still added significant value to some of the most memorable and haunting moments in cinematic history. The bridge scene led to a crewman being fired. The mind-blowing climax of the Civil War battle scene, the good, the bad, and the ugly, rested heavily on a bridge's fiery destruction, but the story behind the shot is just as explosive. You see, director Sergio Leone had planned a grand gesture. He asked the captain of the Spanish Army unit who was assisting with the film to personally trigger the detonation as a token of appreciation for his collaboration. In an unfortunate twist of events, there was a major miscommunication. Turns out a crew member who was using the same radio frequency gave an unrelated instruction using similar terminology. The captain, believing he had gotten his cue, gave the signal, and then the bridge was blown to pieces. The major problem here is that the cameras weren't even rolling. Obviously, Sergio Leone was furious at the wasted shot and the lost set, and in that fury, he immediately fired the crew member who was responsible. However, the army captain, who was caught in the middle, felt a bit responsible for the mishap, so he brought quite an offer to the table. He told Leone that the Spanish army would completely rebuild the entire bridge so that the scene could be reshot. However, he had one condition. He wanted the crew member who had been fired to be rehired. Leone agreed to this, and the crewman was brought back, and the army reconstructed the bridge. It was the second take that finally captured the iconic moment that appears in the final film. Clint Eastwood almost lost his life because of a piece of rock shrapnel. During the filming of the dramatic bridge explosion scene, Clint Eastwood's career and life were almost halted. It was the year 1966, so there were no options for the actors to be composited against CGI explosions, so Clint Eastwood and Eli Wallach took cover behind sandbags in the vicinity of the real-life detonation as the practical effects team blew up the bridge. What happened next was both terrifying and weird because the explosives detonated and a piece of rock shrapnel, which was roughly the size of a fist, launched through the air at quite an unbelievably high speed. It then slammed directly into the sandbag next to Eastwood's head, missing him by just a few inches. This was a crazy moment, and it was as scary as it sounds. If you watch the scene in slow motion, you would probably see the object moving towards him, and his lucky escape is just a grim reminder of real-life risks that were involved in filmmaking before the age of CGI came to be. This scene was just one in many dangerous incidents on set that attracted disaster. In fact, the production of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was clearly wild and unpredictable. And through it all, up until the end, it was filled with both stories of carelessness and close calls. The incident with the rock shrapnel stands out as a cautionary tale of the risks the cast and crew took to make such a beautiful piece of work. From the improvised story pitches to nearly fatal accidents on set, the making of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was truly as wild and unpredictable as the film itself. The tension between Clint Eastwood and Sergio Leone, the ingenious linguistic workarounds, and so many more of these weird facts are all tied together perfectly to put this legendary film together. This wasn't just another movie, it was a whole creative process that turned out to be a cinematic experience. Now that you've heard about all the weird facts, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then leave your thoughts in the comments down below.